We should be live now. Hello.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. This is another one of my lab mates. This is Lizzy Steell. Uh, so most of the guests we've had on here mostly work on kind of Mesozoic paleontology. But of course, it's kind of cliche by now, but the story of the dinosaurs did not end 66 million years ago. They have been very successful since then. The birds are a very diverse group of animals, vertebrates alive today. And of course, most of the birds that are alive today are a group called the passerines, and Lizzie specializes in the evolution of passerines. I believe you have a presentation about that, so take it away.
Okay, thank you, Albert. Oh, let me just share my screen.
Yep.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. So, hello everybody. Welcome to my presentation on passerines for Black lives. So, as Albert just said, the most diverse group of living dinosaurs are the passerine birds. And I'm just going to talk about how amazing they are, how diverse a group, and why we should study them, and how I'm doing so, because I am a first year PhD student, so I've got a long way to go, but my project is looking at passerine morphology and evolution. So a little bit about me. So I'm a first year PhD student at Cambridge. I'm a member of the flock, which is we affectionately call a flock. It's the Field Paleobiology Research Group, which Albert is a member of, and so is Juan, who did the previous talk. So it's quite nice that we've been invited by Albert today to talk about what we do. So before I go on about passerine evolution and how cool they are, I just wanted to show everybody what I've been doing as a kind of fun activity during lockdown. So I was supposed to be doing this kind of outreach activity with the Sedgwick Museum in Cambridge before lockdown started, but because of the pandemic, we couldn't do it, so I moved the resource online. And with Albert and Daniel, our supervisor, we created Build a Bird, which is a kind of activity for kids, but could be for all ages. And basically, we just have information sheets, and I'm just taking this opportunity to plug it because I can. We have information sheets about different morphotypes of birds, and then Albert did these really wonderful illustrations that you can sort of cut them up and mix them up and stick them together and design your own Build-A-Bird. So yeah, it was really fun doing that with Albert, and I'm really grateful that he did his really cool illustrations. But also, as one of my pastimes, I also like to draw. So here's one of my passerines that I've drawn as well. So, oh, here we go. So passerines are also called perching birds, and they take up over half of modern bird diversity. So literally, out of all of the dinosaurs that are alive today, more than half of them are passerine birds, which is just amazing. And they all belong to this order called Passeriformes. There are about 6,000 living species, and they occupy this dark green box on this tree of life of birds. But their actual diversity is massive, and there are not all of the families are represented in. So why should we care about passerines? Well, as my supervisor puts it, their biodiversity is mind-boggling. They're amazing, and they occupy a huge number of different niches across the world. You have insectivorous passerines with big wide mouths, sexual dichromatism, wonderful colours in their plumage, lots of different types of feeding morphologies, foot morphologies for different types of perching and clinging, and also different wing types, because some passerines don't fly very much and some fly a lot and undertake a lot of migration and things like that. So they also, so I'm struggling with, there we go. They also exhibit a lot of complex behaviour. So they are nest building birds, and some of their structures, nests can be quite complex in design. And as you can see, bowerbirds, they create sort of these structures just purely for mating displays, and a lot of different passerines have mating displays. If you think about birds of paradise or mannequins doing a little dance, and there are so many different mating displays. And of course, within this group are the songbirds, which are the most diverse clade or group within the passerines. So if you go outside, if you're in the UK anyway, and you hear bird song, it's almost certainly going to be a passerine, such as this robin, or a blackbird, or it's going to carry on. But they're even some of the loudest birds, and this one here isn't even a songbird. I don't know whether everyone can hear that. I hope you can.
I can hear it at least.
Okay, that's good. So they're just amazing birds, and I'm really lucky to study them. So I don't know whether Juan said in his talk about crown group birds, but crown group. Yeah. Okay, so just to recap, the crown is the most recent common ancestor of a group and all of its living descendants, or extinct descendants. So in passerines, when you look at living passerines, we have the oscines, which are the songbirds. So if you're in Europe, blackbirds, robins, tree creepers, and even crows and ravens. There's also a group called the suboscines, which are mainly restricted to South America. But there's a group that live in Africa and Asia, in the Old World as well. And I don't know whether you can see it, but the New Zealand wrens are a small group of birds. There are only a few living representatives of them today, and they're confined to New Zealand, and they're called the Acanthocetids, or Acanthocetidae. So this is the group that I study, and there are three main groups that are related to each other. So why study passerines? Well, it's kind of traditionally thought that passerines, in terms of their morphology and their skeleton, are all very uniform, and they don't show much variation between different groups or different families. So this is kind of quoted throughout the literature, throughout time, back to the 19th century even, that passerines all look the same if you look at their skeleton, and there's no point studying their skeleton to look at how they evolved, because it won't tell us anything because they're all the same. And this, coupled with their huge species diversity, has seemed to kind of deter ornithologists from looking at their evolution from learning about their skeleton. So I've kind of set out to prove this wrong, because I don't think it's true. So how to build a passerine? I'm just going to quickly go through my PhD project and just show you a few things of what I've been doing, and just look at a few key areas of the skeleton. So this skeleton here is not a passerine, I'm sorry. It's very difficult to find a picture of a passerine skeleton on the internet. But the main bones that I'm just going to show you are the Carpometacarpus, which is the hand bone. So if you think about your hand, where your palm is, there are bones in there, and those are your hand bones, or your metacarpals. I'm also going to talk about the coracoid, which is part of the shoulder that we don't have anymore, and the Tarsometarsus, which is the foot bone. Like the hand bone, we have bones in our feet, and these bones here, they show a fair amount of variation in passerines that we can look at. So the Carpometacarpus, this is what it looks like, and I work with a lot of micro CT scans. So I think you and Juan were having a conversation about scans. So micro CT scanning has been a lifesaver for my PhD so far, because without it I wouldn't be able to do my research through lockdown. And also passerines are all mainly pretty small birds. This Carpometacarpus is only about 10 millimeters long, so it's about or a bit bigger actually, looking from the scale. But anyway, a lot of them are about 1 centimeter in length, and it's very small. So here we have three bones that are fused together. So this sort of nubbin here is the equivalent to our thumb bone in our hand. This big thick one here is the bone for the index finger, and this one is the third digit. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then birds have lost the other 2 digits in their hands, and this forms part of the wing. So a lot of the flight feathers attach to this bone, and there's variation in this bone that people know about, but I've also set out to find some more variation. So using the coracoid as an example, so this is a bone in the shoulder. These are the three main groups of passerines that we saw in the cladogram tree that I showed you. And as you can see, it's kind of a game of spot the difference in terms of looking at the variation between the bones. And this is what I'm doing. I'm just looking at the variation of the bones and seeing whether there are any differences. These, as you can see, so the acanthocytids don't have these two processes, whereas the subossines have two and the ossines have one. These are well-known characters, but there's a lot of variation that people haven't characterized in passerines and the passerine skeleton. So that's what I'm just setting out to do, especially in the group called the subossines, because they're relatively understudied. And this is the Tarsometarsus. So this section here is at the top of the bone, closest to the body, and it's called the hypotarsus. I'm just going to exit the slideshow because I can spin around my 3D micro CT scan.
Nice.
So cool. So it's really good because I can look at these bones on my computer, make them much bigger than they are in real life, and also look at them next to each other. Because one of the things in a museum is that if you have lots of boxes of bird bones, especially if they're small, it can get quite confusing and you can end up mixing them up, which is very bad.
Right.
Especially if people think they look the same, which in my opinion they don't, but you know. I just wanted to run through why passerines are really cool, and also what's the point in looking at their morphology. Well, if you don't have an understanding of their morphology and the variation in their morphology, then you can't extract much information from the fossil record. So passerines actually do have fossils in their fossil record, and some of them are really amazingly preserved. So these are all quite flat, but we can still see a lot of detail. These fossils all come from Europe, and it's very important, in my opinion, that we have a kind of good reference data set looking at living passerines to understand what the variation is in their skeletal morphology so that we can fit the fossils into that framework and understand their evolution. Because fossils tell us a huge amount about the evolution of a group, as you've probably learned from some of the other talks. So yeah, basically a lot of these fossils, we don't actually know where they resolve phylogenetically, which means we don't know which groups they're most closely related to. So there's active work going on, but I'd quite like to in the future have a look at some of these fossils to put them alongside my new observations of the living passerines, because that's a kind of right now, if you look through the literature, there's a lot of work looking at just fossils and some living taxa, but not really enough. So I think adding a large array of living taxa to this data set will be really beneficial. And it's really exciting from looking at fossils and knowing where they go in your evolutionary tree. You can learn about where different groups evolved on the planet. So look at their biogeography and understand where they evolved and when they evolved through time. So yeah, that's pretty much my talk. I'd just like to say thank you for listening. And if you're interested in Build-A-Bird, check out my Twitter because there's a pinned tweet about it. Thank you to Albert for inviting me and all of my collaborators for everything with my PhD. It's been really fun.
Excellent. That was an excellent talk. Thanks, Lizzy.
Thank you.
So if anybody has questions about the most diverse group of living dinosaurs, please send them in, preferably with a donation. Yeah, otherwise, I guess I could ask you some questions.
Do you want me to end the slideshow?
Yeah, you can end it if you want.
Okay. I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Yeah, okay. So, from what I understand, I believe you previously, before starting the PhD, you worked with phylogenomic data, is that right?
Yeah, so I was using molecular data in a phylogenetic context, yeah.
Right. So looking at catfishes, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But now your PhD is very morphology focused. So how has that been different? I imagine there's some a bit of a learning curve, or
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it has definitely been very different. So, when I was doing my masters, I was working for a whole calendar year on these African catfish. There are a group of catfish in Africa that are really very understudied and relatively unknown. So I was learning a lot of very different skills. Um, I was in the lab extracting DNA and sequencing genes and doing the same kind of thing in terms of looking at their evolutionary history, but I was using their genes to do it. So I came from a kind of molecular background with lots of lab skills to a vertebrate paleontology degree, PhD, which was obviously very different. But I'd throughout my undergrad, I'd done various courses, sort of getting to grips with zoology and morphology. But I'd never worked on birds before, so I actually have found this year a big learning curve, learning all of the anatomy for passerines, and I'm still learning. Every day I learn something new, and I'm still kind of getting to grips with what people have already written about in the literature. But yeah, I think I'm finding it way more interesting because when you're doing lab work in a molecular lab, it's the same thing day to day.
Right.
It can get very boring and very cold when in a very air-conditioned lab,
Yeah.
especially when there's tinted glass and there's no sunlight and you're doing it all summer. Whereas here, I can kind of look at my laptop, get a bad back because I'm looking at my laptop, but at least I can take breaks and I
Right.
don't have to think about the PCR machine
Right.
gels. Yeah, I've really enjoyed. I enjoyed both. I'm so glad that I learned a lot about evolution and biogeography and speciation and things like that during my masters, and I think I've made the right choice coming to vertebrate paleontology PhD because I think that was my calling. I took a long time to decide, but
Right.
I was really drawn to the vertebrates and the tetrapods even from thinking about this.
Yeah, no, I think having a broad kind of background in biology can give you a very good foundation for vertebrate paleontology, even if most paleontologists don't work with the molecular stuff. But especially if you're looking at a group with living representatives, it can be quite helpful. Um, Yeah, I've definitely used molecular data in my own work, although I haven't done any of like the actual sequencing or anything. I don't really understand that aspect of it, but definitely we do want to kind of take into account all the evidence that we can marshal together, and so kind of looking at all these deep questions from different perspectives
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
a good thing to do. Yeah. So
So, are there any questions from the crowd yet?
I have not seen any, but please do send them in. Passerines are extremely fascinating. I remember they are most of the birds that are alive today. So many of the birds that you are familiar with are passerines. So I would be surprised if you don't have any experience or uh, with or questions about them. But in any case, what is your favorite passerine?
Oh, that is the hardest question.
Yeah,
I think
I know.
I I go outside for my lockdown walks or runs, and I just every single passerine I find, I just think it's really cute. And I mean, I see personality and character
Hmm.
in every living bird, basically.
Yeah.
But I get really excited when I see like warblers
Hmm.
because a lot of the summer migrants, it's kind of special to see them during the summer.
Right.
But just I mean, your backyard passerine, it's probably got to be a blackbird because they're just so fun to watch. I mean, so I saw my grandma yesterday from a safe distance.
Hmm.
She has a blackbird family in her garden,
Oh.
and the female is so familiar with her that the female comes into her conservatory and eats grapes off the table. It's just so fun. But I mean, I think probably the most favorite bird I saw in the wild was a couple of years ago. I was in Ecuador on a really amazing trip, and I was hiking in the cloud forests, and just out of nowhere, a Andean cock of the rock male just
Oh,
appeared.
wow.
And they are, if you don't know what one is, you have to Google it because they're so beautiful. And they're Subos signs, which is the kind of focus group for me. So it was the most amazing spot. And it
Right.
just flew through the trees, landed, looked at us, and then flew off for like 1 second of my life.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, I've never been to the neotropics before, but definitely it's on the bucket list because it just sounds incredible.
Yeah, definitely. I've been a couple of times, and I think I'll keep going back because it's just amazing. I love it.
Excellent. Yeah, I think probably it would probably be hard for me to say a favorite species of passerine, but my favorite group of passerines is probably the nuthatches.
Oh yeah, they're so cute. Yeah. So if you're in the UK, the nuthatch you'll see is the Eurasian nuthatch.
Right.
They're just really pretty, so kind of slate grey blue on top, and then have this like orangey underside, and they
Right.
cling to the branches and tree um, like the side of the tree.
Yeah.
They're just really cute.
Right. Uh, let's see. So we have a question from someone who wants to see if you can ID a species, but okay,
Okay.
this might be a little difficult 'cause I'm not sure how I'm supposed to show you the picture from.
You send it to me and
Yeah, okay,
put it up on my camera
we can try that. Let's
if
see.
you want to.
This is a bit odd. All right, now I have to download that image saved, and I guess I'll send you a WhatsApp message or something. Uh,
Sure.
uh,
So it's quite funny. In our lab, sometimes I give people quizzes if they can ID a bird.
yeah,
Um, I've been giving our supervisor Daniel a lot of recordings of bird song to see if he can ID it.
right.
Pretty good fun. I don't know who's winning so far because
Yeah, hang on, it's taking a little bit, but
no problem.
yeah. So I believe this is coming from someone living in California. So I don't know if you're familiar with the birds there, but
I'm happy. But our new postdoc in our lab might be familiar with those birds at the
oh,
moment.
that is true. Yes. Okay, I finally managed to get the
There we go.
photo, and so there it is. It's a bit
Cool.
blurry.
Okay,
Uh,
so this is the blurry picture that we.
right.
Oh, it's blue
Yep.
and it's got. It looks like it's got like a black mask on its face. I mean, it's
Yeah.
hard to tell.
Yeah.
I would say it's an Oscine songbird. Does the person who sent it know what it is, or are they asking?
Right. So are you testing? Uh,
Honestly, I don't know my North American
yeah.
birds.
No, I don't blame you. I mean,
But
there are.
you must know some North American
I do
birds.
know North American birds. It is quite blurry. So uh,
Thoughts?
usually bluebirds in North America, I would say either bluebird probably, or probably a western bluebird in that part of the world. But it is quite difficult to make out in this photo, unfortunately.
The only
Yeah.
North American bird that was blue that I've seen is a blue jay,
Yeah,
but don't
yeah.
know if that looks like
In
a jay.
California, it would be a scrub jay, but I'm not sure that that's what it is, because due to
Well, I'm pretty good at deducting what species they are based on a photo, so
right.
I could always try later.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you get back to our viewer if you figure out the answer. Yeah, okay. So someone else who lives in who has lived in California says California scrub jay. So
Cool.
that seems likely to me.
Nice. Well, now I've learned something.
Excellent. Let's see. I'm just gonna double check and see if there's no other questions. But if there aren't, I think I need to go fetch our next guest, which will be Clara,
Of course.
another fellow lab mate. Um, but yeah, it doesn't look like there are any further questions. So, thank you so much for joining us, Lizzy.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you for everybody listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and
Right.
don't forget to donate. If you...
Yes, indeed. Please do donate. Okay, so I will turn off the feed now.